The story begins on November 9th, 1989, the day the Berlin Wall was brought down, a day that marked a significant turning point in history. However, in a small town in France, a young boy named Nico Lasarte was completely unaware of the world-changing events unfolding. He sat in his room, glued to the television screen, listening to the news. The weather forecast warned of an impending 72-hour storm, predicting it to be extremely dangerous. People were advised to stay indoors and not venture out unless absolutely necessary. Nico, however, was not too concerned about the storm. He had set up his camera in front of the TV, preparing to record something important to him. Playing the guitar was his passion, and he wanted to capture one of his own songs on tape. Just as he was about to start, his mother entered the room. She had to leave for work despite the severe weather warnings. Nico, being a thoughtful son, had created a mixtape for her, a small but heartfelt gesture. She smiled, took the cassette, and left the house, disappearing into the stormy night. Now alone, Nico turned his attention back to his recording. He picked up his guitar, adjusted the camera, and prepared to play. But before he could finish the song, something unexpected happened. A piercing scream echoed from the house next door. Startled, Nico froze. The sound was unmistakably one of fear and distress, a woman crying out in terror. A sense of unease settled in his chest. His first instinct should have been to call the police, to let the authorities handle whatever was happening. But curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, got the better of him. Instead of picking up the phone, he decided to investigate himself. Nico's neighbor was a man named Angel. He lived with his wife, and it seemed like the two were in the middle of a heated argument that night. Curious and concerned, Nico made his way into the house, only to be met with a horrifying sight. Angel's wife was lying lifeless on the floor. Before Nico could fully process what had happened, Angel appeared at the top of the stairs holding a knife in his hand. His eyes locked onto Nico, and in that moment, the boy realized he was in grave danger. Without a second thought, Nico turned and ran for his life. But Angel wasn't going to let him escape. He rushed down the stairs and chased after him. Nico ran as fast as he could. He reached the road and tried to cross, but before he could make it to the other side, a speeding car struck him. Nico died on the spot. The accident brought police to the scene, and soon the truth about Angel's crime was uncovered. He was arrested, and justice was served. That tragic night happened in 1989. Fast forward 25 years to 2014. Now the story shifts to a new family. We meet Vera Roy, a kind and loving woman, her husband David, and their little daughter Gloria. They were a happy family, content with their lives. David worked at a bank, while Vera was a nurse. At one time, she had dreamed of becoming a neurosurgeon, but after Gloria was born, she chose a different path so she could have more time for her family. The Roy family was about to move into a new house, a house with a history they were completely unaware of. Their new home was the same house where Nico and his mother had once lived, the house that had witnessed tragedy 25 years ago. But now it was just a forgotten story. No one really talked about what had happened there anymore. One of the people still living in the area was a man named Ader, a professional pilot. Years ago, Vera had met him on a train, but life had taken them in different directions. Vera had fallen in love with David, and they eventually got married. Now, by coincidence, they were about to move into the very same neighborhood where Ader lived. Over the next few days, Vera, David, and Gloria finally move into their new home. Everything is going smoothly as they settle in, unpack their belongings, and adjust to their new surroundings. Meanwhile, on the news, a strange report is being broadcast. Scientists are shocked by an unusual weather prediction. A powerful storm is set to hit the region again, exactly on the same date as the one that occurred 25 years ago. This is highly unusual, as nature rarely repeats itself in such a precise manner. The coincidence is baffling to experts, but Vera and David don't pay much attention to it. That evening, Vera returns home from work and finds that David has also just arrived. As they unpack, Vera stumbles upon an old photograph, one that shows David with his ex-girlfriend. She looks at it for a moment, but rather than feeling upset, she simply smiles and sets it aside. The past is the past, and she knows that what matters now is their life together. While exploring the house, they come across an old television with a camera attached to it. It looks ancient, covered in dust, and seems untouched for decades. Curious, they wonder why no one had ever bothered to remove it. Later that night, they decide to turn the TV on. As it flickers to life, they discover a stack of old tapes lying nearby. Intrigued, they start playing them. As the audience, we already know Nico's tragic story, so we instantly recognize what they are watching: old recordings from 1989, footage from the time Nico lived in this very house. At first, Vera and David assume it's nothing more than old home videos. But then, something strange happens. David removes one of the tapes, but the TV screen doesn't turn off. Instead, it suddenly starts broadcasting an actual live news report from 1989, the historic moment when the Berlin Berlin Wall was being torn down. This catches their attention for a brief moment, but they don't think too much of it. During dinner, David invited Ader and his mother over and brought up a discussion about television. Ader then revealed that the child in the tapes David had seen was Nico Lasarte, his childhood friend who once lived in the same house. Nico had witnessed a murder. Angel, a neighbor, had killed his wife. Terrified, Nico ran home but was tragically hit by a car and died. As Ader recounted the story, his mother became uncomfortable and scolded him to stop. Later, David looked up the incident online and discovered that when Angel was arrested, he confessed that he owned a slaughterhouse and had planned to dispose of his wife's body there, but he was caught before he could do so. Vera, uninterested in these grim details, focused on the approaching storm. Thunder and lightning filled the night, keeping her daughter Gloria awake in fear. To comfort her, Vera showed her a ballerina figurine, soothing her until she finally fell asleep. In the middle of the night, dark clouds loomed over the house and lightning flashed across the sky. Vera suddenly woke up to the sound of the old TV turning on by itself. When she went to check, it was playing news from 1989. Just as she was about to turn it off, she saw Nico on the screen. A strange phenomenon had occurred. A doorway between the past and present had opened. In the past, Nico was about to record his song when he too suddenly saw Vera. To their shock, they could hear each other. Nico, thinking it was some kind of trick, was skeptical, but Vera, already aware of his tragic fate, desperately tried to convince him not to leave the house. She even showed him the very room she was standing in to prove she was real. This was the night Angel would kill his wife, and Nico, witnessing it, would meet his own death. Vera pleaded with him not to go outside, warning him that if he did, he would die. After much hesitation, Nico finally listened and stayed inside. But just as the situation seemed to change, a bright flash of light engulfed the scene, cutting it off abruptly. Because of Vera's actions, Nico never died. She had saved his life, but in doing so, she unknowingly altered the future. When Vera regained consciousness, she found herself lying in a hospital bed. Her memories were hazy and she could barely recall what had happened the previous night. It all felt like a strange dream. As she tried to make sense of things, a nurse entered the room and informed her that she was needed in the operating theater. Vera was confused. Why would she be called for a surgery? Even more unsettling was the fact that the patient had already undergone the same procedure just days ago. But the biggest shock came when she realized she was no longer a nurse. She was now a neurosurgeon. Struggling to comprehend what was happening, Vera rushed to her daughter's school to pick her up, only to discover that her daughter didn't exist. Panic gripped her. She then went to David, desperate for answers, but he didn't recognize her as his wife. In this new reality, they had never been together. The storm that night hadn't just saved Nico, it had thrown Vera's consciousness into an entirely different timeline, a parallel universe where events had unfolded differently. Here she had never met Aitor, which meant she had never crossed paths with David, never married him, and never had their daughter Gloria. Instead, with no child to raise, she had focused on her career and become a neurosurgeon. But Vera's mind retained the memories of her original reality, the one where Nico had died, where she met Ader on the train, married David, and became a nurse. That world still existed, but now it was no longer her own. And in this new reality, the boy she had once saved had lived, but everything else about her life had changed forever. Vera breaks down in tears, desperately trying to explain her situation to everyone, but no one believes her. With no other options left, she goes to the police station and pleads with an officer to listen. Inspector Lara patiently hears her out, then calmly asks, "When was the last time you saw your daughter?" Vera, still shaken, replies, "Last night. She couldn't sleep because of the thunder." Lara then asks, "And when did you last see your husband?" "Last night as well," Vera says. "He was in bed. Then I heard the TV turn on by itself. I saw Nico Lasarte on the screen, and after that, I don't remember anything." Understanding her distress, Lara promises, "I'll help you, but you need to tell me everything, every detail." However, he also points out something unsettling. The life you're talking about, the one where you're a nurse, married to David, and have a daughter, doesn't exist. To prove this, he takes her to the hospital. There she undergoes an MRI, but the doctors find no signs of any neurological disorder. A doctor then explains, "You are one of the best neurosurgeons in this hospital. There's nothing wrong with you. Maybe you remember David because you performed his brain surgery recently. That's probably why you believe he's your husband." To further convince her, they show her an office. Her office. It has all of her belongings, her work files, and clear evidence that this has been her life all along. But Vera remembers none of it. To her, the reality she knows is different, the one where she was a nurse, married to David, and raising their daughter Gloria. As she struggles to process this, her gaze drifts outside to the storm clouds. A realization dawns on her, and she whispers to herself, "This all happened because I saved that boy's life." Without explaining anything to anyone, she abruptly rushes out of the hospital, determined to find a way to fix what she has done. The scene shifts to the past, revealing what really happened to young Nico. He had always suspected that Angel had murdered his wife, but he had never been able to reach the scene in time to prove it. As a result, Angel was never arrested, and only Nico knew the truth. Determined to find evidence, Nico took a risky step. The next day, when Angel left the house for an errand, Nico broke in. Inside, he made a horrifying discovery: Hera's lifeless body. But before he could process it, he heard the sound of Angel returning. Panicking, Nico hid under the bed. Underneath the bed, Nico noticed a watch with the initials CM engraved on it. As Angel entered, he received a call from a woman who mentioned that she had left her watch at his place. "If it's here, I'll find it," Angel replied casually. What happened next was even more terrifying. Right in front of Nico's hiding spot, Angel began cutting Hera's body into small pieces, stuffing them into a bag. He then took the remains to his slaughterhouse and buried them there. Nico, traumatized, had seen everything with his own eyes. The gruesome images were burned into his memory. Unable to keep it to himself, he went straight to the police station the next day. However, being just a child, he struggled to explain what he had witnessed. Instead, he kept saying, "I saw a girl from the future on TV, and she told me everything." Naturally, the police dismissed his claims, thinking it was nothing more than a child's wild imagination. They didn't take his words seriously and didn't even launch an investigation. To make matters worse, Angel himself filed a report about the missing watch, stating that someone had broken into his home. This led the police to assume that Nico had stolen the watch and was simply making up stories to cover his tracks. Meanwhile, Nico's mother grew increasingly worried about her son. She believed he was losing his mind, obsessed with bizarre ideas of time travel and premonitions. Convinced that something was wrong with him, she decided to leave town. Shortly after, Nico was admitted to a hospital for psychiatric treatment, marking the beginning of a new chapter in his troubled life. Back in the present, Vera goes to David's house, desperate to find information about Nico Lasarte. She searches his computer, but before she can get far, David's wife, Ursula, confronts her angrily. "Get out of my house now," Ursula threatens. Moments later, David arrives, furious to see Vera. "This woman came to my office today too," he exclaims. Neither David nor Ursula recognizes her, and they immediately call the police. Vera pleads with them, "Please, I just need to know about Nico Lasarte. He's the only one who can help me." But David and Ursula have no idea who Nico is. In this reality, Nico had been missing for the past 25 years. He had vanished without a trace. Realizing she won't get any answers here, Vera tries once again to convince David. "You're my husband. We have a daughter, Gloria," she insists, but he looks at her like she's a stranger. "That never happened," he tells her firmly. With the police on their way, Vera has no choice but to flee. There's only one person left who might help, Nico, but to find him, she needs a lead. She hides in Ader's car, hoping to reconnect with him. In her previous life, Ader had been her best friend. Surely he would remember something, but when Ader finds her, he looks at her with confusion. "I don't know you," he says flatly. Vera is stunned. "No, that's not possible. We met. We were friends. I married David because of you." But Ader shakes his head. "We never met, Vera. I don't know who you are." Something had erased their connection. Something had changed fate. Determined to prove their bond, Vera reaches out and takes his hand. And suddenly, a flash of memories. She sees glimpses of another life. But this time it's different. In this version of reality, she never met Ator. Instead, she had met someone else. But who? That answer remains a mystery. As Vera leaves the airport, she catches a TV interview featuring a female author discussing her book, Mirage. The author reveals that the idea for her novel came from a young boy she once met, a psychiatric patient who claimed he had seen a girl from the future on TV. Hearing this, Vera immediately realizes the boy was Nico Lasarte. Now she has a new lead. She must find this author. Just then, Inspector Lara arrives and, believing in her story, offers his help. Together, they track down the author and meet her in person. Vera desperately tries to explain, "The girl Nico saw on TV 25 years ago was me." However, she has no concrete proof, and even Inspector Lara struggles to support her claims without evidence. Then a crucial memory strikes Vera. She remembers exactly where Angel buried his wife's body. Acting on this lead, the police search the location and uncover Hera's remains hidden in a bag. But this discovery also raises suspicion. How did Vera know where to look? The police briefly consider her a suspect. Despite this, the truth finally comes to light. Angel is arrested, along with Clara, who turns out to be Ader's mother, and their friend Roman. Angel had married Clara after Hera's disappearance, but now justice is finally served. During police interrogation, Angel and Clara deny any involvement in the murder. However, the full truth finally comes to light. Back in 1989, Angel killed his wife, Hilda, but not as part of a planned crime. The real reason was his affair with Clara, Ader's mother. Angel had intended to tell Hilda that he wanted a divorce, but she had already grown suspicious. On the day the Berlin Wall fell, she pretended to leave for Germany, but secretly returned that evening to catch Angel in the act. At the same time, across the street, Nico Lasarte was about to record his song, his mother having just left for work. Furious at the betrayal, Hilda grabbed a knife and attacked Angel. In the struggle, she was accidentally killed. In the original timeline, Nico had witnessed this scene and ran to the police. But in this altered version, where Vera had warned Nico not to go, he never arrived in time. This gave Angel the opportunity to hide the body and fabricate a lie that Hilda had left for Germany and never returned. Later, he married Clara, and only Nico knew the truth, though he could never prove it. As the police investigation continues, Inspector Lara gives Vera an address where she might find Nico. When Vera arrives, she unexpectedly sees David with another woman. Seizing the moment, she blackmails him, knowing he works as a banker with access to client records. "Give me information on Nico Lasardi, or I'll tell your wife about us." Reluctantly, David gives in and searches for Nico's details, finally giving Vera the lead she needs. Vera arrives at the given address and meets Nico Lasardi's mother. Meanwhile, at the police station, a shocking revelation unfolds. Inspector Lara is actually Nico Lasardi. After the world dismissed his story as a child, Nico remained silent, waiting for the day when the girl from the future would return. In the process, he broke the chain of events. Knowing Vera was supposed to meet Ader on the train, he took Ader's place instead. This led Vera to befriend him, eventually marry him instead of David, and live an entirely different life. The moment Lara touches Vera, she sees everything, flashes of her altered life. But to her, it still doesn't feel real. She wants to return to her original timeline. The author Vera had seen earlier had once mentioned that to return to her past life, she would need the same conditions, the TV and camera. However, when she searches for them, they're gone. Lara admits he destroyed them because he didn't want to lose her. The truth is, Vera had always existed in this world, but her memories belonged to the alternate timeline. Meanwhile, in the reality where she had married David and had a daughter, the memories from this timeline had transferred to that version of Vera. Seeing no other way, Vera takes a drastic step. She decides to change the past once again. Knowing another storm is coming that night, she attempts to take her own life, forcing Nico to act. Desperate to save her, Nico rushes to the TV, turns it on, and speaks to his younger self, instructing him on what to do. He tells young Nico never to board that train so that Vera's life remains unchanged. The scene cuts, and when Vera wakes up, she is back in her original life, the one where she is married to David and has a daughter, Gloria. However, one thing has changed. Nico never met Vera as an adult. Instead, she still met Ader on the train, leading to everything unfolding as before. But Angel's secret remained hidden. He had murdered his wife, but had never been caught until now. Knowing the truth, Vera reports him to the police, leading to the arrest of Angel, Clara, and Roman. In the end, Vera sees Inspector Lara, Nico, once more. She smiles at him and says, "I knew you would come," but Nico looks at her, confused. "Have we met before?" he asks, and with that, the story ends. This story isn't as confusing as it seems. Everything makes sense when you follow it closely. If you enjoyed the explanation, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.